Last month, CJA filed a landmark case on behalf of 4 survivors of the Lutheran Church Massacre, one of the deadliest attacks against civilians committed during Liberia's civil war. During this attack, 600 unarmed men, women, and children seeking shelter in a Red Cross center and church were executed by the armed forces of Liberia. This case is one of several concerning Liberian war crimes moving forward in the US and in Europe, and was built largely due to the brave work of victims, journalists, activists, many of whom are here today, like Massa Washington, Lavetta, Kofi, everyone. But especially the man we are here to honor tonight with the Judith Lee Stronach Human Rights Award, Mr. Hassan Bility. Let me finish. As editor-in-chief of the Liberian Analyst newspaper in the 1990s, Mr. Bility came to prominence as a journalist willing to criticize Charles Taylor's brutal regime and its atrocious human rights record. As a result of his independent reporting, he was arrested and tortured on Taylor's orders. With the help from Amnesty International, his release was secured, and he later testified against Taylor before the Special Court for Sierra Leone. After the war, Mr. Bility returned to Liberia and founded the Global Justice and Research Project, dedicated to documenting wartime atrocities. GJRP's tireless work has led to the arrests of alleged Liberian war criminals throughout Europe and the US. This success is due not only to the high standards of professionalism and hard work, but also to the trust that war victims have for Mr. Bility personally. But before we welcome Mr. Bility to the stage, we'd like to share a clip from the documentary Camp 72 by Seema Mathur, who is here tonight as well. Everyone's famous, everyone's popular. Who's with us tonight. And this shows why justice is so important for the victims of Liberia's brutal civil wars. I can't stress enough that the justice cascade that we're seeing is really because of Hassan Bility. So please welcome him to the stage for his award.
Good evening to all. The documentary was heart-touching. I'd like to say, first of all, thank you to everybody who showed up here tonight, to the CJA especially, and my Liberian colleagues, the sponsors, and all of those who are involved with the fight for justice. My family, the Civitas Maximas, Geneva-based. I am honored and humbled to receive this award, and would like to dedicate it to the courage of the survivors of Liberia's civil wars, and to the memories, also to the memories of those who lost their lives, over 200,000 Liberians. Without their courage, especially the courage of the survivors, this would not have been possible. So to them, I dedicate this award. When I first founded the Global Justice and Research Project in 2012, it was with the goal of seeing war crimes trials against perpetrators held in Liberia, especially those who committed the most serious abuses of international humanitarian laws. Liberia, which was subject to 14 years of war and subject to brutal dictatorship under President Samuel Doe and subsequently President Charles Taylor, lost hundreds of thousands of its citizens and non-citizens as well in the two civil wars. Even though the world witnessed these atrocities, Liberia had not held anybody accountable. Liberia as a state has not, up to today's date, held anyone accountable for those crimes inside Liberia. Now there are currently half a dozen cases against suspected war criminals from the two Liberian civil wars across Europe and North America. This is truly amazing. The government of Liberia has the responsibility, we believe, to protect its citizens, and subsequent governments also have the responsibility to honor their treaty obligations. The Liberian government is under treaty obligation to assist in prosecuting, in investigating international criminal activities, and the Liberian people are also calling on the Liberian government and have called on previous governments, especially the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf-led government, to prosecute suspected war criminals. Nothing can finally heal the wounds we suffered or replace the friends and families we lost, but obtaining justice, feeling heard, and knowing that we've been able to fight back and seek justice on some level is truly magical feeling. In the days following the conviction of former rebel commander Mohammed Jabata, aka Jongo Jaba in Philadelphia, and the civil suit against Moses Thomas in relation to the Lutheran Church massacre, there were reports across the Liberian press in relation to the Lutheran Church massacre. And these reports came from both Liberian and international media organizations. And there were stories, there were comments from both Liberians at home and Liberians in the diaspora. This is what happens when survivors are able to speak and have access to the courts. They hold perpetrators accountable. They become empowered themselves, and this is why the work we are doing at the GJRP, Civitas Massima, CJA, and a growing number of partners around the world is so very important. We're trying to create a world where potential future war criminals might not have a place to hide, not even in the United States. As you saw in the film clip, Camp 77, in Liberia we had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and one of its members, honorable members, Martha Washington, is here in the audience. One of its recommendations, one of the TRCC's recommendations was that the government move forward with war crimes trials. There are a variety of reasons why this didn't happen under the previous president. But today, we have a new president, Mr. George Weah, who partially campaigned on the fact that he was not involved in the war, in the two wars. We hope that this administration, his administration, is the one that will finally bring justice to Liberian victims and rebuild Liberia by making sure that there is accountability for wartime atrocities. I wish to send out this message to President Weah. I wish to call on him that the time is now to make real the dream of all Liberians, thousands of Liberians who voted for him, who asked him to fight their cause, who asked him to fight for justice for them, whose votes, whose tears, whose sufferings catapulted him to the presidency. I want him to listen to him. I also want President Weah to be the champions of the thousands, of the hundreds of thousands of people who have voted for him and who are calling on him to do something about justice, to create a war crimes court in Liberia. This is very important. If there were needs or if the opportunity existed to carry out these trials in Liberia, there will be no need for these trials to be held in the United States or Western Europe. But the condition simply does not exist up to this point. We intend to continue to pressure the current government, along with our foreign allies, to make sure that a condition is created in Liberia so that these trials, like Cambodia, can be held in Liberia. And this is very important. This is important for a few reasons. One, it will serve as a deterrent to future would-be war makers. And it's also very important because for generations unborn will have the opportunity to say, our forefathers stood where duty required them to stand. And in the words of a former American diplomat sent to the United States Embassy in Monrovia back in the 1990s, Mr. David Park, I'd like to remind us all Liberians and our partners that there are more good people than bad people in Liberia. And it is time for the good people to stand up. It's time for the good people to stand up. The good people in the West, in Europe, in the United States, in Liberia, we're more than the bad people. And to those who intend to scare off human rights defenders, we've got some message for them. We want to tell them that their manufactured fears are not going to stop us from doing what we do. I say manufactured fears because an overwhelming majority of the Liberian people do support our work. In fact, surprise, the Liberia Council of Churches in the past several days has made a position statement. And what is their position? Create war crimes court in Liberia and prosecute war criminals. So with this level of support and the support from the Liberian people, this serves, in our view, as a form of protection and security for us. I'd like to say thank you to the CJA, to Nushin, who's made the countless number of visits to Liberia since we started this work. Since this partnership began in 2012, to Kathy, Dr. Kathy Roberts, and I'd like to say thanks to everyone in this room for your support, to CJA for the stands you've taken to support institutions that stand for justice, to support institutions that want to make sure that the hiding places of suspected war criminals are reduced or don't exist anymore. Thank you very much. I feel very blessed to be part of this wonderful community of advocating for justice and accountability, and I'm very much moved to be surrounded by so many inspirational people. So many good people from the CJA, CJA clients, former CJA executives, former members. As part of the CJA family, I hope to learn from you. I hope to support you and to work with you as we move forward in our campaign for justice in Liberia and around the world. And I'd like to leave you again with something I said before, quoting David Park, an American diplomat assigned to the United States Embassy in Monrovia in the 1990s. There are more good people in Liberia than bad people. It's time for the good people to stand up. It's time for the good people to stand up. Thank you very much. God bless you.